If your main argument for how to grow the economy is, I knew how to make a lot of money for investors, then you're missing what this job is about.
Presidential politics heating up, and so is the debate over the role of American business and Republican candidate Mitt Romney's experience in the field of private equity. Ed Conard is former managing director at Bain Capital and the author of Unintended Consequences: Why Everything You've Been Told About the Economy is Wrong. Ed, good to have you on the program.
Maria, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So this week, private equity and the experience of your former boss, Mitt Romney, has become an issue in this election cycle. You spent many years as managing director at Bain. What do you say to critics of private equity who say private equity destroys jobs?
Well, the first thing I'd say is let's not kid ourselves about these attacks. They're not really on private equity. They're under the guise of private equity. They're really attacks on business generally, because private equity is not doing anything different than what business is doing. We're trying to make businesses stronger. We're trying to grow them faster. We're trying to serve customers better than our competitors. And ultimately, that creates profit for investors. But we're not doing anything different than what any other business is doing.
Okay, but what are you saying, that business destroys jobs too? I mean, the question is, they're saying private equity destroys jobs.
Sure, I think when jobs are being lost at times, sure, all businesses are always cutting costs, but at times, in industries that are losing jobs, it's rare that investors are making profit. The idea that private equity focuses only on buying the most damaged companies and trying to fix those companies only, most of the investments are in very successful companies. I tell you, a secret to investing was, you're in a horse racing business. You buy a thoroughbred. You teach that horse how to run faster. You don't buy the lamest horse and try to fix it up. Occasionally you end up there, and you have to take a lot of tough efforts to make it as successful as you can possibly make it. But the idea that that's the only place where private equity is focusing, again, they're trying to differentiate private equity from business in a way that's unrealistic.
And I guess the idea is that when private equity acquires a company and tries to make it healthy again, yeah, you cut jobs in the beginning, but ultimately you're trying to make a healthy company so that you could create jobs at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're always trying to make the companies stronger and grow them faster. But I would tell you, I don't think that private equity is skewed towards the unhealthy companies. Quite the contrary. I think we're trying to buy strong companies and make them better.
Now, you've gotten a fair amount of press for the ideas in your book described as defending the 1%, or even the top of the top percent. Do you think there is some good in income inequality?
Well, I make the argument in the book that if you believe that we're still living in the economy of the 1950s, you might scratch your head and wonder why income equality has grown. You might come to the conclusion that the talented people in the U.S. haven't earned it. But the economy today is very different than the economy in the 1950s. In the 50s, we're capitalizing on material goods, mass market goods like cars. You need big companies, big-scale investments. Individuals are less important in that economy. Since the commercialization of the internet, the investment opportunities have changed. Now, 13 people can create Instagram and $1 billion of value in 2 years. We have an enormous opportunity in front of us to innovate that, in the old economy, that economy slowed down in the 1970s and 1980s. We need to pump up the growth rate here. Individuals are more important. Equity that underwrites risk is much more important today than it was in the 1950s. And so I think ultimately you come down to this question, which is, do we have to pay successful risk takers as much as we're paying them to achieve the things that we have achieved in the United States relative to Europe and Japan?
But how do we bring the country together to make people understand sort of the strength and power of upward mobility? I mean, there's such anger in the country, class division. Do you think upward mobility still exists in the United States?
I think that, sure I do. And I don't see why the success of another Steve Jobs or another successful entrepreneur has any effect on income mobility. Now, it's true that, say, coming out of the Second World War, we educated our population, and the education has been distributed more efficiently across our population. So is it, to a certain extent, is income inequality going to slow down a bit as you distribute education more effectively? Yes, it is. But I don't think that's indicative of a problem in America. I think that's indicative of success.
Mm-hmm. But wealth sometimes creates benefits for society, and at other times creates more wealth. So you have strong faith that markets reward those that contribute the most. One of the lessons of the financial crisis, it seems, though, was that the incentives to make money were in place and the risks were in a different place. So can we have faith that, you know, markets are going to actually settle out and sort of create truths, or are the markets misplaced?
Well, I think people misunderstand the financial crisis. So, in part, they believe that banks made reckless, no money down loans, and they were crippled by those loans when real estate prices fell. But in truth, in securitizations, investors are in effect making the homeowner's down payment. And in large part, those were non-bank investors. So from a bank's point of view, or AAA point of view, if you will, which is largely where the banks invested, it didn't really matter whether a homeowner made the down payment or an investor made the down payment. Either way, they were protected from a 20% loss in real estate, drop in real estate prices. There was a 30% drop in real estate prices, and institutional investors flooded out of the banking system. We had $1.5 trillion of withdrawals from our banking system. We've had about $300 billion of subprime losses, largely suffered by non-bank investors. That's a very different problem, a problem that this administration has not addressed or solved.
Ed, great to have you on the program.
Maria, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it. Ed Conard joining us right now. Up next on the Wall Street Journal Report, if Springfield